Hello, students. We're back again to continue with the dirtiest topic of the year. That's right, we're talking about pollution this week. And yesterday, if you recall, we talked a little bit about the difference between point source and non point source pollution. Feel free to review your notes before Friday's quiz. And then we talked about land pollution at greater length. And we finished with the lovely map of nuclear waste sites in the United States. What a lovely thought to end the period with. Well, today we're going to pick it up with two more types of pollution. And we will begin today with air pollution. So let's talk about air pollution in our notes right now as we, let me get rid of that there. There we go. So air pollution. There are different kinds of air pollution, and we're going to go over several different types of air pollution today. The first one you may not even think about. I would imagine most people, when they hear air pollution, they think of some of those images I showed you yesterday with the smog and factory spewing smoke into the atmosphere and so forth. But there's another type of air pollution that we are all exposed to that we may not even think of all that much. And that is indoor air pollution. Indoor air pollution. Boy, that was a tongue twister for me. Indoor air pollution includes particles and chemicals. If you look at this picture here, and you might even want to jot some of these down in your notes, pollen can get into your house. Maybe you even have plants in your house that can create a condition that might irritate some of you. Viruses and bacteria, to be sure. If you've got a cold, somebody else has a cold or an illness of some kind, that's air pollution. Cleaning chemicals. Oh my goodness. Quick story about cleaning chemicals. You probably have certain chemicals in your home that you use on a regular basis to clean your kitchen, bathroom, and rest of your house, like bleach and ammonia and so forth. Glass cleaner has ammonia in it. But you may not be aware that some of these household cleaners, if they are combined with one another, can literally kill you because of the air pollution. I'm not going to get into the details, but let me just say, don't ever use products that have bleach in them and combine them with products that have ammonia in them. A chemical reaction occurs between the two and can create a very toxic byproduct that, if inhaled, can literally kill you. Every year, there are janitors and custodians around the country that actually die because they mix these two chemicals, even not just mixing them in bottles, but use one, wipe something down, and then use the other one. Just the vapors from them, the ammonia and the bleach, can be very, very deadly. So be careful when cleaning. And by the way, that was not suggesting that you tell your mom or your dad, well, I can't clean because chemicals might kill me. No. You can still clean. Just use them according to the instructions on the label. Pet dander. Pet dander is an indoor air pollutant. If you've got cats or dogs roaming around your house and you dust or vacuum, you know that a lot of that stuff is caused by your pets. Some environmental pollutants can include, not like factories in your own home, but new carpeting. New carpeting can release chemicals into the air. It's always a good idea, if you get new carpeting, open up the windows and let some fresh air in, because they have chemicals in them that can be dangerous if concentrated. And last one here, tobacco smoke. If you live in a house with smokers, Hopefully, they will smoke outdoors and not indoors. But if they smoke indoors, even if you don't smoke, you are inhaling the secondhand smoke, which certainly is a form of pollution and can be very dangerous to your health. So, indoor air pollution is one type of air pollution. Another source of air pollution, probably more familiar as far as the imagery here is concerned, is motor vehicle exhaust. You get a few million vehicles driving on the roads every day just in our own state of New Jersey. Forget about the rest of the country or the rest of the world. And every single tailpipe is releasing exhaust. Now, over the years, the exhaust of motor vehicles has gotten a lot cleaner, but there's still a lot of pollutants that come out of that exhaust. Some nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, and carbon monoxide, various chemicals that pollute the air. And then you put diesel vehicles on top of that. How many of you have seen a big old diesel pickup truck accelerating from a stoplight or something, and you see the black smoke billowing out of it? You don't want to be inhaling that, folks. So motor vehicles, another source of air pollution. This is probably the most thought of source of air pollution when you think of air pollution is industrial burning, or otherwise called emissions, factory emissions. Industrial burning, I mean, just look at the pictures. They kind of speak for themselves. All of this smoke, not necessarily a good thing. Although I will say, generally, the larger towers here, the wider towers, those are typically from cooling towers. And I mean, quite honestly, the smoke you see coming out of the large towers like this is probably just water vapor. It's just steam. The taller, thinner towers, that's not steam. That's smoke, and that is producing air pollution, to be sure. Quick little story here locally: PPL across the river from our township. They used to burn coal back when I was your age. They used to burn coal. And that coal produced a lot of air pollution, and that air pollution was carried over our township and the township that I grew up in right next door. And it would settle down on the grass, and you'd walk around barefoot, and your feet would be black from the soot, from the emissions, from the coal dust that would come out of the power plant. Since then, thankfully, a number of tests were done, and there was enough interest to stop the coal burning. They no longer burn coal. They burn oil and natural gas, which is certainly a cleaner fossil fuel, although not perfectly clean, but certainly cleaner than coal. And so you can walk around barefoot now in the grass and not come back in with black feet, like I did when I was a kid. But industrial burning, another source of air pollution. Temperature inversion. Let me explain this, because this is kind of funky. I don't want to mention names, but in our township, there are a number of places, and we talked about this briefly yesterday, I believe, that burn wood to heat their homes and to heat their water. If you just drive around our township, you know, these little outbuildings with the little stacks on them. And sometimes in the spring and in the fall, you can see the plumes of smoke, yellowish smoke, just hanging out in the valley. I see it frequently driving into school, and I'm driving in the Pequest Valley, and I see this plume of smoke just hanging out. It's not rising into the atmosphere. That's due to what's called a temperature inversion. Temperature inversion is when you've got an air mass of a certain temperature down below, usually it's warmer in the valley, and a colder air mass on top of it with a higher air pressure. Remember that from when we learned about weather. pushing down on it. And it traps the air mass in the valley. This happens very frequently in our township in the Peak West Valley. And as a result, any pollution like smoke from an outdoor boiler is going to get trapped in that layer of the temperature inversion until the temperatures balance out in the atmosphere and that smoke is allowed to go up. It's just going to get stuck. Over the years, we experience temperature inversions here at the school as a result of the landfill up the road. Sometimes you may detect a nasty odor in the classroom. That nasty odor oftentimes is from the landfill up the street. Why does it come here? Well, it's basically following the Peak West Valley all the way down to the school. And because of the temperature inversion, those odors can't escape upward. And so they escape inward into our classroom. All right. So another source of air pollution, smog. We made mention of this yesterday, but let's list it today. Smog is a word that is a result of combining two other words, smoke and fog. We know what fog is. Fog is simply a cloud at ground level. So fog, not a big deal. It's just a cloud. It's just water vapor. But and this happens oftentimes in cities where there is a lot of air pollution from either vehicles or factories and industrial sources. There's smoke that is produced. When smoke and fog interact with one another, they form what is called smog. This is a great picture of what smog looks like. Here's a close-up of smog. Los Angeles in California is famous for its smog on a regular basis. Lots of big cities experience smog, but because of the environmental conditions in certain areas like Los Angeles, smog can be a real significant source of air pollution. So bad, in fact, that sometimes they issue warnings, smog alerts, where you are encouraged not to go outside at all, but to stay indoors because the smog is so dangerous to your health. All right, let's talk about one more here. As far as air pollution is concerned, air pollution can result in acid rain. Acid rain or acidic precipitation. What exactly does that mean? Well, as we will learn when we get to physical science, we're going to learn a lot about chemistry and the interaction of certain chemicals with water vapor, moisture, and other gases in the air. And we'll do some experiments with this when we get to chemistry. But for now, let's just look at this picture. Because of emissions going into the air, such as sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, ammonia, these chemicals that go into the atmosphere mix with the moisture in the air and they form other things like sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, carbonic acid. They form acids in the atmosphere that when it rains acid out of the air. There are some places in the world, like the Black Forest in Germany, probably one of the most famous forests in the world, is disappearing. It's disappearing because of acid rain. The industrialization of Europe causes such acidic precipitation that it's killing the forests. Closer to home in New England, there are lakes in New England that are dead, biologically speaking, because of the industrialization of the Midwestern part of our country, causes acid rain to fall in New England. This is a regional issue, not just a local issue. In fact, check out this map of acid rain. The Western U.S. isn't really impacted much by acid rain. And the reason for that is because the Midwestern part of the United States like Chicago, Detroit, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. These states here are highly industrialized. And as you know from our weather lessons, weather patterns in the US generally go from west to east. And so a lot of the air pollution from the Midwest eventually mixes with the atmosphere and falls down as precipitation, whether it's rain, snow, sleet, hail, or whatever, in the mid Atlantic and the New England states. These red zones here, and look at this, here's New Jersey. We're in the red zone, at least the northern part of the state is in the red zone. This region of our country, if we test the acidity of precipitation, which, you know what? That sounds like a good activity for us to do. If it rains tomorrow, we're going to get some rainwater and do just that. But the precipitation is slightly acidic here in the mid Atlantic and northeastern states of the US because of air pollution. So that's it for air pollution. Let's finish up now with the third type of pollution for this week, water pollution. Water pollution. Look at the picture here. This might be a familiar scene in our rural township. A group of cattle drinking water from a stream running through it. That's a bucolic scene. That's a beautiful scene to farmers and those that love the agricultural setting of our township. And I think it's great too. However, would you allow a young child to play in the stream here and roll around in the stream or go swimming downstream or eat fish caught downstream, knowing that all of these cows use this water as their bathroom? Think about that for a moment. Animals do what they do. And so the liquid and solid waste from their excrement flows into water bodies and flows downhill. It's just a matter of life. In nature, this happens in nature too, which is why you should never drink untreated water in the woods, because the deer and the bear in the woods do the same thing. They come to the water source for a drink. They take water in one part of their body and they release their waste from the other end of their body at the same time. And so the runoff is inevitable. But in agricultural areas, there certainly are going to be other chemicals in addition to the animal excrement, but there may be fertilizer in the field as well that can flow into the water. So agricultural sources are one source of water pollution. Another source is golf courses. In fact, golf courses are a huge source of water pollution if there are water bodies nearby, because in order to maintain a golf course and make it look pretty and have the green really green, golf course owners have to use a lot of fertilizer, and that fertilizer is in the form of various chemicals, various nitrogen chemicals. And those chemicals, when applied to the turf or the grass of the golf courses, goes into the soil to nourish the plants, which is what its intended purpose is. But every time it rains on a golf course, that water is going to run off the golf course into water bodies. And in addition to the water, it's going to carry the dissolved fertilizer along with it. So the fertilizer, definitely another source of water pollution. Ooh, goodness gracious. Here's another one that is not too appetizing. Sewage, human waste. Now, when I was your age, it was still legal for human waste to be dumped into the oceans. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, I can remember as a kid problems on the Jersey Shore with certain objects floating up on the Jersey Shore and closing the beach because there were solid materials floating up and the levels of bacteria were very high, and it was dangerous to swim in the ocean off the coast of New Jersey and other states too, for that matter. But growing up in New Jersey, that's what I knew. Back in the 80s, laws were passed banning this practice, and rightly so, because imagine if you were an aquatic creature and the tanker truck came out for tanker ship came out for its daily purge and dumped all this stuff on your head and in your family and in your food source. Not very nice if you think about it. And so we had to then find alternate ways of disposing of it. And there became a controversy over sludge farms. In fact, one such farm was very controversial back in the 80s, right down the street from our township here. But that's a story for another day. This is like raw human waste, raw sewage being dumped into oceans. This actually happens all around the world. Thankfully, we do have laws here to protect our water from the direct release of human waste. However, it does happen, sometimes accidentally, sometimes on purpose, to try to evade economic costs of treating it properly. And sometimes ships, like tourist ships, come in from other parts of the world, and it's pretty expensive to treat all of the human waste from the thousands of people that are vacationing on board, and they'll try and get away with just dumping it in the water, which is illegal, but it can and does happen from time to time. But I'm sure you would not want to swim in this water or eat anything out of this water. So, sewage, human waste is another source of water pollution. Here's another: fossil fuels. We had a whole week learning about fossil fuels and in particular the petroleum oil that we learned about. If there are drill rigs off the coast in particular, accidents can happen to them, or tanker ships can have accidents and run aground or have leaks. There was one famous one years ago. The Exxon Valdez in Alaska created a terrible, terrible spill of fuel oil in the marine environment and killed uncounted, probably millions of animals as a result. But here are three pictures showing the devastation that can occur if fuel oil is dumped into the ocean water. It doesn't decompose very readily, and it wreaks havoc. And finally, actually not finally, two more here. Next one is hazardous waste. There's a book here called Tom's River, which, by the way, is in New Jersey. There was a famous release of hazardous waste from a factory in Tom's River a number of years ago. A book and a movie was made about it, and it released this hazardous waste into the environment that eventually got into the human population and created a whole host of birth defects and problems as a result of the chemicals. So hazardous waste, definitely a source of water pollution. And that brings us to the last one here: power plants or thermal pollution. I made reference earlier to PPL, and I'm not calling them out by name here, but PPL, the power plant right across the river from our township, produces the electricity that many of us depend upon to run our electronic devices. Thankfully, they no longer burn coal. They burn oil and natural gas, a cleaner source. But in burning it, they generate heat. That heat energy is used to generate electricity. But then there's also the waste heat that arises from all of the warmed up water from generating the steam to produce power in the power plant. Well, it's located right on the Delaware River, right across from our township. And I'm an avid paddler, so I paddle canoes and kayaks up and down the river, right along our township here. And it's not uncommon that you will see in the river where the power plant has its wastewater, not chemicals, but water emptying into the Delaware River. There's kind of a plume of vegetation that grows in these areas because the water is warmer than the surrounding water of the river. It's nearly impossible to bring the temperature of the wastewater down to the actual temperature of the Delaware in order to avoid at all costs any kind of thermal water pollution. It would probably take as much energy to do that as the power plant produces. So they do their best to try to minimize the thermal release, but it's unavoidable. And if you are an avid fisherman or paddler, if you spend time on the river, you'll see these plumes of vegetation. By the way, this is a thermal imagery picture, not of that power plant, but along the coast somewhere where you can see warmer water coming out into cooler water. So power plants can cause thermal pollution. Doesn't involve chemicals, it just involves heat energy. And that can affect the biological communities that exist in that water body. Now, another thing here is another local connection here to thermal pollution and how to avoid it. We have nearby the Merrill Creek Reservoir. The Merrill Creek Reservoir in Harmony Township is intended to pump water back into the Delaware River when the climate is drier and the power plants downstream need more fresh water in the river to take in. And so at Merrill Creek Reservoir, there's a pumping tower. A pumping tower, and I'm not showing you a picture of it here, but a pumping tower with, I think, 3 different inlets. Because I'm sure you've noticed this, if you've ever gone swimming in the ocean, in a lake, in a really deep pond, if you swim down deeper, it gets colder. So it's usually warmer up top, colder at the bottom, and there are different temperature layers that exist in a lake or a reservoir like Merrill Creek. If they need to pump water back into the Delaware, they actually take the temperature of the Delaware River and they try to match up what level of the reservoir has the closest temperature water to match the temperature of the river, and they'll open up that inlet or outlet in that case and pump water back into the Delaware in order to minimize the thermal water pollution. All right, so there you have it. We've talked a lot today about the different sources of air pollution and water pollution. A lot of information jam-packed into one period. And tomorrow, we're going to be doing some activities with, that device set up in the back of the lab we're going to play around with tomorrow. And so until our lab activity tomorrow, I'll just say bye-bye.